Welcome to Learning Dorico. I'm Dr. Scott Watson. In this focused tutorial, I'll be sharing with you how to typeset a simple 16-measure melody using Dorico. If you haven't checked out my previous two videos, one on Dorico's user interface and the other on note entry basics, you really should, since I'll be using techniques shared in each of those. This video is organized in 4 sections. First, I'll review how to set up a score or a project. Second, I'll show you the 2 different ways to do note entry that I recommend for a project like this. One is what some people might call step entering, where you're using pitch before duration. In other words, select the pitch, then select the rhythm, and just going back and forth. However, we will be selecting the pitch using a MIDI keyboard. That makes it a lot faster. The other way I'm going to show you how to put notes in is real-time recording to a metronome click. So if you're a good pianist, you might be able to just play the melody in real time and get all your notes in. Third, I'll be going over basic layout and formatting tools. We'll be using layout options, which has a lot of neat tips and tricks there, and also Dorico's Engrave mode, which is the way that Dorico formats and lays out a page so it looks right. And fourthly, some wrap-up items will include playing your score, which is a great way to check and proof to see if you have any wrong notes, and printing your score, both sending to a printer and also printing to PDF so you can share your scores electronically with others. Okay, let's get started with typesetting this simple tune called Orally. All right, I've launched Dorico and we're ready to start a project. I could go to File and say New, Command N, but I'm just going to use the keyboard shortcut, Command N. And it's going to ask me what instruments do you want in your project. All I want is a single instrument. Because it's a lead sheet type of melody, I'm going to choose a treble clef non-transposing instrument. So click add single player. I'm going to choose Woodwind's oboe. Oboe is the instrument I like to use for these lead sheets. Has a nice clear sound. But you could have chosen flute or violin or any treble clef non-transposing instrument, and then you say add, and it adds it to your score. Now my score has a single staff, right? The oboe. All right, and I'm going to resize the window so I can work in it. We're in setup mode. To move to write mode, I could use Command 2 for write mode. Remember, setup was Command 1, and write mode is Command 2, and engrave is Command 3, right? So write mode is where we want to be. We could also just, use our mouse and click to go to the write mode. Now we see our score. By the way, let's go ahead and put the title in and the composer in. Again, in the file menu, we could do project info, or we could use the shortcut Command I. These keyboard shortcuts do save a lot of time, so let me press Command I. That opens up the area where we can type in our title, which is Orally, and our composer, which is just the word traditional, since this is a folk song, and we don't know who wrote it, right? By the way, we're not going to use flows, which in Dorico are used for movements. So for instance, say we had a piece like a concerto or a sonata, and it had movement 1, which had its own title, and movement 2, which had its own title. Those would be flows, flow 1 and flow 2. Since this lead sheet doesn't have separate flows, we can just ignore that. We'll just say project, apply, and close. But we do want to get rid of the flow title. So I'm going to do that by going into the layout options. So here it is, layout options, or Shift Command L. Let me do that. Shift Command L takes us into layout options. Under flows, I'll just say, let's never show the flow heading, right? And I showed this in my previous video, by the way, in the overview video. All right, so never show it and apply it. And now the flow is gone. Let's also get rid of the staff heading, that staff name oboe. Again, Shift Command L takes me into layout headings. Let's go down to staves and systems. And under staves and systems, I can say staff labels on first system, none, and staff labels on subsequent systems, none, and then apply, and we won't see oboe any longer. There we go. All right, we've done enough that I think it's time to save. Let's go to File, Save, right? The shortcut is Command S. And let's give it a title, Orally, maybe my initials, SW. Let's put it on the desktop so it's easy to find. Okay, let's set up our score, and we'll do this using what Dorico calls popovers. In other words, if I do a shortcut like Shift M, I'll be able to put in the meter. Or if I do Shift K, I'll be able to do the key signature. Or if I do Shift B, I'll be able to select the number of bars. So those little input fields that appear above or over the measure, they're called popovers. So I'll select this first measure. Let's tell it Shift M is for meter. Put it in 4/4. 4/4 is a shortcut. And hit return. And now it's in 4/4. Let's do Shift K for key and put a capital E, meaning a major key, lowercase b, major E flat, right? E flat major, and say return. And now it's in E flat major. What about the tempo? That's Shift T. And the shortcut here is Q for quarter note equals 76 beats per minute. I could have also done something like Allegro or whatever I wanted to do there. If I start typing Allegro, it'll say, wait, do you want that? Allegro, quarter note equals 140, and so forth. So whenever you start typing something, if Dorico recognizes it, like Q for quarter note equals, and then a tempo, it fills in. Anyway, hit return. All right, so we're at quarter note equals 76. Number of bars or number of measures we want. We want 16, so I'll do Shift B and then put the number 16 bars. And now we have our 16 bars. This is called the system track up here, and if you don't want to see it, you can go to the View menu and hide the system track like that. I like to see it, so I'm going to say, let's show the system track. I've done, again, some more things, so I'll say Save. Now we're ready to go into note input mode. Again, I could put under the right menu, note input is Shift N. I could use that from the menu, but I like to use Shift N. Select the measure you want to put the notes into, type Shift N, and we're in the note input mode. Let me hit Escape and get out of that just to show you that return is the shortcut for note input mode. So now I'm in note input mode. Either way, when you do note input mode, you'll notice down here in the lower left-hand corner is the duration of the grid. That means the value that the cursor will advance when you hit the right arrow, or the left arrow, it'll go back. So right now it's set to 8th note, and I'm just going to leave it at 8th note. And you can see when I hit the arrow, it goes forward in the grid in 8th notes. So let me go back to the beginning of that measure. We're in note input mode. How do I want to put the notes in? Well, I want to use a MIDI keyboard, and I want to be able to select the note first on my MIDI keyboard and then select a rhythmic keyboard shortcut from my QWERTY keyboard. This is the tool for when you want to choose the pitch before you choose that duration shortcut. So you toggle that on. When you toggle that on, now I can choose my pitch on my keyboard, right? And it doesn't actually enter anything until I choose the rhythm shortcut. By the way, the shortcut for toggling pitch before duration is the letter K. When I hit K, boom, it goes into that mode, right? So pitch before duration is the way I like to work, and I like to select the notes from my MIDI keyboard and use my other hand to select the rhythm. Now, I've memorized the rhythmic shortcuts, but if you don't, you can either put stickers on your number keys on your computer, or you can have Dorico's handy-dandy PDF help sheet nearby. Anyway, I'm going to play the B flat, type the number 6 for quarter note, and then play the E flat, type the number 6 for quarter note, and so forth, right? And until I get to a duration, like the F is a number 7 half note, then back to number 6, then back to half note 7, back to quarter notes. See how fast this is? But number 8 will be my whole note. Then up to the G with 6, 6, 7, then up to the A flat, 6, 6, 7, and then quarter note 6. 8 is my whole note, and then back to quarter notes. 7 for the half note, back to quarter notes. Now watch when I play this half note. I want a dotted half. So right now I see just a normal half note. If I type the period, the dot is added. I do just want to pause here to say that the ability for me to put the dot in after the half note is a preference that I chose when I set up Dorico, and you may want to as well. If you go to the Dorico preferences and look under note input and editing, where it says specify accidental rhythm dot and articulations after inputting the note or before inputting the note. I think the default was actually before inputting the note. In other words, I would have had to say dot first and then put the half note in. But I'd like to put the half note in and then put the dot in. So I'm going to choose after inputting note, and you might want to as well. And if you haven't done that for the first time, you'd have to say apply and then close. And that's what allowed me to put that dot in after the half note. Also, I haven't mentioned what to do if you make a mistake. Well, Dorico's pretty easy. If you just delete the note, select the note, hit the delete key, it removes it. And then you can go back into note input mode and you could just play it in again. Right? What if you play it in incorrectly? Like say I play an E natural, right? Well, you can use the negative to take it down a half step or the plus to take it back up a half step. You could also use these shortcut keys over here to make it natural, for instance, right? Or if you're off by a step, that would be Option and the up arrow. That changes things by one step, or the down arrow changes it by a step. I'm holding down the Option key. Or if you do Option Command up, that takes it up an octave. Option Command down takes it down an octave. Or if I just type the wrong rhythm, right? So I could select that note, and instead of 8 for a whole note, let me type the number 7 and make it a half note, or the number 6 and make it a quarter note. So you can fix mistakes after they've been made. Let's look at how to do real-time recording, which is such a time saver if you can actually play keyboard. So let me select all of the notes. I'll do select the first one, hold the shift key, select the final, and then hit delete. And I'll basically go back to having empty measures. All right, a few things before we set up to do real-time recording. One is we're going to go into the preferences and just look under play at a few things. Number one, down here, I see under MIDI input devices, my USB MIDI keyboard. You want to make sure you have that plugged in and configured. And then also under play, we're going to look for the area called quantizing. And quantizing is the rounding of rhythms. So for instance, if I look at RLE, I see the shortest rhythm is a quarter note. So I could actually set it to a quarter note, which means even if I make a mistake by coming in a half a beat early, like an eighth note early, it's going to round it to a quarter note. And if we're sure it doesn't have any like triplets, we could say don't detect tuplets, right? So just turn that off. And don't detect grace notes, things like that. So I'm just going to leave it on quarter note, which means it's going to fix any rhythm errors I make, or most rhythm errors I make that could mess up the real-time recording. And I'm going to say apply. Okay, and close. The other thing is we're going to use the metronome is going to click, kind of give us a beat as we play. I'm just going to hit this. I think Command R would be the shortcut, right, for real-time recording, but I'm not ready to record yet. I don't think I actually have to go into note entry mode, but if I wanted to start recording here, for instance, I'd want to select that measure so that it gives me the click off one measure before that, right? Okay, so let me select the first measure and hit record, and I'll listen for my click, and I will attempt to play it on my MIDI keyboard all the way through. Here we go. Halfway there. Here we go up to the G. Last 4 bars. One, two, three, off. Okay, and we'll hit stop. And look at that. Now it put some slurs in that I actually didn't realize I was playing, but apparently I played very legato. I can remove those slurs simply by selecting them and hitting the delete key, right? Selecting them, hitting delete, selecting them, hitting delete. If I don't want the slurs in, right? There we go. So let's see, how did I do? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, it looks like I got every single measure right, including the dotted half by holding it for just 3 beats, then releasing. Of course, I want to get rid of this last measure, select the system track, hit the trash can, and there we go. So we've got all of our notes in the way we want it for this project, and I am going to save it. And now we're ready to look at some of the layout things. So for instance, I want 4 measures per system in this. And I want there to be more space between the systems so that, let me zoom out. Command negative takes me out, Command plus takes me in, right? So I'm going to zoom out. I'd like this to have more space between systems, and I'd like it to take a little over half the page, like the original that I'm trying to match. So there's two main things that we can do. Let's go into the layout options. Remember that Shift Command L. And from there, I'm going to look at page setup and rostral size. Now, rostral size is kind of like the percentage size. So I'll show you what I mean. If I go to rostral size 0 and say apply, and we go back, you'll see that now the note heads are a lot bigger. But there is also, it's almost like we zoomed in, and it's just, everything's a lot bigger, right? So I'll show you what that used to look like, right? Like that. And it just blew everything up. So rostral size might be part of the fix, but another thing, let me do Shift Command L. Another thing besides rostral size would be vertical spacing, and I think that's more what I want to do. We could do staff to staff if we had more than one staff, or inter-system gap is really what I'm concerned with. So let's just try 16. I'm going to recommend we try 16, change that, and here we have to say apply, right? So now I've applied that 16 space. It was 10, now it's 16. And look at that, it is more open, and I do want it to be more space between systems. Okay, but there's actually some great things in Engrave mode, which we haven't visited before. We could either click on Engrave mode like that. Remember, we were in write mode, or you could use Command 3, which takes us to Engrave mode. Command 2 is write, Command 3 is the shortcut for Engrave mode. And what I'm going to try to do is sort of format the system. So I'm going to create some system breaks. So after 1, 2, 3, 4 measures, if I click on this note here, right, you can see it's selected and say create a system break. Now after 4 measures, there's a system break. And right here, there is what is called a signpost, right? And I could hide the signpost, but let's leave them for now. So we see a signpost that shows me we have a system break. And let's go 1, 2, 3, 4, and then right here, select this and say system break. We have another system break, and then one more for the last 4 measures. Let's do create system break, right? There we go. So now we have the system break and we see the signposts. By the way, if you don't like to see the signposts, as I said, you can turn them off, hide signposts, and now they're not there. But you might want to remind yourself about the system break. By the way, if you press the tilde sign, you'll see in Engrave mode, press the tilde sign, it'll hide all those different markers and formatting elements so that you can kind of see what your score looks like. I have a little bit more space here than I do here and here. So let's go back to the staff spacing. Let me just drag this one down a little bit and drag this one down a little bit like that. And now press the tilde sign and maybe just a little bit more on this one, right? There we go. And that looks about the way I want it. By the way, if you want to move more than one system at a time, you can select, I'm click dragging and holding around them. I can select more than one system, but that's where I have to use the option and the down arrow to move them together. Watch what happens if I try to move one of them alone. It just will always move just one alone, even if I had several selected. So if I select both of those and then try to drag them both, it'll still just drag one, right? So the only way to drag systems together is if you, let me do this, move these down. If I select the two and then do option up arrow, it'll move them up together, or option down arrow, move them down together. So if you do want to move, like say for instance your whole score there like that, you select them all those handles, and then use the option down arrow if you want to give yourself more room. Again, with the tilde sign, I can see what it looks like, and I kind of like the way it looks. Maybe I'll just move this down a little bit. Yeah, but that looks pretty good. Let's go back to write mode, and we're really happy with it. We'll say save. Okay, one last thing, and I should have done this when we were setting up the score at the beginning of the video. Just realized we want to get these measure numbers underneath rather than above the staff. And that is, once again, Shift Command L, or layout options. If we go under bar numbers and we change it from show these bar numbers above the top staff, let's do it below the bottom staff. If we just make that change and say apply, notice that the measure numbers are where we want them. So maybe when you set up your score, that would be one of the first things you would do if that's how you want your measure numbers to appear. And that is generally how I want the measure numbers to appear. Okay, and let's close this video by just showing you some things like how to play your score, which is a great way to proof it, by the way, for mistakes, and then how to print it, which is also a great way to proof it for mistakes. So we don't really need to go into play mode, which looks more like a digital audio workstation. We can stay in write mode, but the way I want to show you is that if you select a note, type the letter P, it'll begin to play back. If you type the letter P again, it'll stop playback. Of course, if you hit the space bar, it'll resume playback wherever the playhead was. And if you hit the space bar again, it'll stop it. So that's a shortcut, right? Also, if you wanted to play it from somewhere else, like say I wanted to play it from here, once I click there, I would have to hit P again to start playback, and then hit P again to stop it. So that's to play your score. How about to print your score? Well, we just go into print mode, and of course that is also, let me go back to the write mode, which was Command 2. If I go to Command 5, that would be print mode. We have different ways of printing. We can either print to a printer, or we can print graphically, like to PNG or to TIFF or to PDF, which is very common. A lot of times you want to export as PDF so that you can share it with somebody electronically. So if I was going to print to a printer, I would just choose my printer from this menu, and I've already selected my printer, and then I would go down here and hit print. Pretty much I'm happy with everything else the way it appears there. If I want to print as a graphic file, let's say I choose, let's print it as a PDF. That's where you'd say, where do you want to store that PDF? So the destination folder right now is, I think, my desktop, but I could just choose that specifically desktop. And now it'll be on my desktop, right? By the way, if I want to change the file name, I usually just keep Dorico's defaults, because Dorico does have a very peculiar way of naming files. So down here where it says file name region, it puts in these sort of placeholders, and you can add to the, just forget about that for now. Maybe later we can delve into that. But for now, what I would say is if you don't like the file name that Dorico gives it, change it after you've already left it. So let's try that right now. Let's export this as a PDF on my desktop, and I'll say export, and it's doing it right now. And then I'm going to go to the desktop, and there it is. Okay, so if I don't like that file name, what I would do is I would click once on it, and then type whatever I do want. Say I wanted orally in all caps, and then I wanted in parentheses my initials, right, as my file name. So now I've just changed the file name, but after the fact, it's a lot easier to do it that way. Hope this video has been helpful. Typesetting a simple melody. There's more to come in future videos, so stay tuned, and good luck learning Dorico.